delighted to be here in Providence, and thank you all for coming out on a hot day for a very, very important issue. Let me first just salute my colleagues. David Cicilline, who, as you know, is within the leadership in the House among the Democrats. There's nobody who's more respected than he is, or more trusted among our colleagues, and he does you proud in the United States Congress. He has been a leader on these issues of fighting money in politics and the corrosive influence that special interests have in Washington on how policy gets made. He's been a leader for years, and we certainly, in the Democracy Reform Task Force, which I share, we're tapping into David's expertise as we were pulling together the blueprint for H.R. 1 for the People Act, this broad anti-corruption package which we were able to get passed in March. I also want to salute Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who is also a leading voice when it comes to breaking this connection between money and politics, and particularly disclosing the dark money, the secret money that hides behind the curtain, but floods our politics with huge sums, huge dollars to try to influence outcomes every single day, both in elections and in the way that we govern. He's been a voice for a very long time on this. So right here in Rhode Island, you have two of the national leaders when it comes to this issue of fighting corruption and making sure that we insist that our democratic institutions are strong. I find myself these days going anywhere that people will let me come, any city, town, village, or hamlet, where I can stand up and thank Americans for what they did on March 8, 2019. Because that was the day that we passed in the House of Representatives with the gavel being held by Democrats for the People Act. And the reason I thank Americans for that is because they made it happen. You made it happen. Because you sent a team of reformers to the House of Representatives in the 2018 election who had made this their #1 priority. And they said to voters, if you will give us the gavel, we will go to Washington. And the first thing we'll do is bring legislation to the floor and then pass it. We'll fight back against this deep and corrosive corruption that we see across the country. And they followed through. H.R. 1, that's why it has that number, was the first bill introduced. We introduced it on day 1 of the new Congress. And within the first 100 days, we got it to the floor and we passed it. And that was saying back to the American people, when we make a promise to you that we're going to clean up the system, we're going to fix Congress and Washington so that your voice matters and that you are no longer locked out or left out of your own democracy, we're going to follow through. People understand, increasingly, they get it, that money is blocking progress on everything else we want to see. We're going to hear from people today on the issue of gun safety. We know what the influence of the NRA and the gun lobby has been for decades in Washington. Writing checks, leaning on the system to make sure that we can't do smart, common sense things when it comes to pushing back on gun violence. We have to break that connection. That's what this anti-corruption package of H.R. 1 is all about. We know that the oil and gas industry has been calling the shots for years when it comes to the environment, that they're pushing back against the things we want to see in terms of climate change legislation, because they have a lot of influence and sway in Washington because of the money and how it operates. We know that Big Pharma has been the problem when it comes to getting sensible legislation in place to reduce the cost of prescription drugs, because it's not in their interest to let that happen. So they use their money and their army of lobbyists, which they deploy on Capitol Hill, to stop progress. And you can go through every single issue that matters to Americans across the country, and if you step behind the curtain, you can see how the big money and special interest influence has affected progress on those important things. So let me just very briefly tell you what's in H.R. 1. You can divide the bill and its reforms, what it seeks to do, into 3 categories that respond to 3 very basic messages that the American people have been sending us in Washington for years. The first is, make it so it's not an obstacle course. when we try to get to the ballot box. Make it easier, not harder, to vote in America, to register. David talked about automatic voter registration. If we could get that in place across the country, it would add tens of millions of people to the voting rolls in this country. That's about access to democracy. Measures like that, fixing partisan gerrymandering so people feel respected when it comes to how lines are drawn in America. That's included in H.R. 1. So we have a whole set of reforms that go to this basic principle of, I just want to get to that ballot box without having to jump through hoops every election. The second thing that people say to us is when you go to Washington, behave yourselves. That's a simple proposition. Be ethical, be accountable, be transparent. And so we've got a whole set of ethics reforms in H.R. 1 that make sure that whether you are serving in the judiciary, you're serving in the legislative branch, or you're serving in the executive branch, you abide by a set of principles, a code of ethics, that you act honestly, that you remember that you're there in the public trust, not to advance yourself or some personal agenda or special interest agenda. And the third message we heard from the public, and we leaned in with H.R. 1 as a response, was when you get to Washington, don't get tangled up in the money. Remember who sent you there. Remember who you were elected to represent. And so, as was mentioned by David, we took Senator Whitehouse's and David Cicilline's Disclose Act, which is about exposing the dark money and creating transparency and accountability on where that money is coming from. And that was incorporated into H.R. 1, part of what we passed on March 1st. We have a system of matching funds for small donations to support campaigns across the country. So you don't have to go to the lobbyists or the K Street crowd or the insiders or the deep money folks to finance your campaign. You can reach out to the broad public and power your campaigns that way. The citizens can own their elections again. So this is all about everyday Americans standing up and through H.R. 1 saying, we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to fight back against this corruption. We're going to insist that we be let back into our own democracy. As I close, let me just frame it another way for you. We know from the polls, we know if we just listen carefully to people out there, that for years now, people have become disgusted with Washington and politics. They think that the system is corrupt and doesn't pay attention to them. And that makes them feel powerless in their own democracy. And when people feel powerless, they get angry. And they have to channel that anger. In 2016, a fair number of Americans across this country decided to solve their anger about corruption by turning to Donald Trump and handing him a baseball bat because he promised that he would come up to Washington and disrupt the system and drain the swamp and clean things up. He hasn't done that. But in 2018, the American people chose a different path to solve their anger. They decided to invest their dreams and their hopes in a team of reform candidates that grew out organically what was being heard in the country. And that team of reformers said, you send us to Washington, you give us the power, we're not going to take that power, we're just going to hold it for you, the people. And in the first 100 days, we will do something real with a plan. Not just slogans, not just demagoguery, but a real plan to solve your anger. And that's what H.R. 1 was. That's what passed on March 8th. So in 2020, the public has a choice. Two options for how you solve your anger about the system. You can lean in one direction, which is to hand power to a demagogue, or you can lean towards a team of reformers. And that's what we're asking the public to do in 2020. As David said, we have a problem. America has a problem because despite this deep appetite to fix corruption, Mitch McConnell is standing at the doors of the United States Senate with his arms crossed, saying to the American people, you shall not pass. He will not let people into their democracy. He will not let us get that back for communities all across this country, and we're going to keep the pressure on. And the message to him is, if you won't put that bill on the floor, then we're going to try to change the composition to make sure it gets to the floor. Democrats have made a promise to clean up government. That's what H.R. was all about, and that's why I'm excited to be here and join with my colleagues in emphasizing how important this issue is. I'm also delighted now to introduce someone who's become a tremendous ally in this fight, Tiffany Muller from End Citizens United. This is an organization that a few years ago started to have a conversation with the American people about their anger over this terrible decision by the United States Supreme Court. And what they realized was that millions of Americans across the country wanted to step up and fight back. And they tapped into that energy and they channeled it in a way that is now supporting reform efforts all across the country, including working very closely with us to make sure that H.R. 1 got to the floor and was passed in the United States House of Representatives. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and I'll now turn it over to Tiffany.